Hello, I'm Dr. Frances Pitzilis. What is the best diet? Well, that's the big question. You hear so much about this diet and this is good for that and this is good for that. And there's a lot of media hype at the moment on the paleo diet. But what evidence do we have, and how do people really work out what is the best diet for us as humans, but also in particular for specific individuals? Well, we all started as Neanderthals. I'm sorry, but we did. And the Paleolithic diet was a hunter-gatherer diet, and there's been quite a lot of study on that. We ate nuts and seeds. We couldn't eat grains because we couldn't cook them at the time, and the wild grains were very tough. Every now and then we caught some meat. The diet was actually varied between different Paleolithic groups because if you were near the sea, you could have some fish. But most Paleolithic groups didn't have salt. So we have different diets slightly and variations within the Paleolithic diet. Today's diet is far different. We have far more processed food. We have grains, we have gluten, we have milk, we have processed cheese. So we have a lot more saturated animal fat because the original animal fat was wild and was much better for us. Cultivated animals have more saturated fat. We have a lot more starch and sugar and processed foods. So a very big difference, and we know that the modern so-called standard diet is behind a lot of Western diseases because we know that hunter-gatherer groups, third world countries and tribal type groups don't get some of the modern Western diseases. So then we look at the Mediterranean diet, which is apparently the most studied diet in the world. And I've read a lot of scientific papers, and the problem that they all discuss is that the Mediterranean diet is only tested on Mediterraneans. They're done in Greeks or Italians, people around the Mediterranean. The other problem with the Mediterranean diet is that that is quite variable as well. There's quite a variation on how much bread, how much grains, how much seeds, how much fruit and vegetables people have. So we can't really compare apples with apples when we're looking at the Mediterranean diet research exactly. But what we can surmise from the research is that if you are a Mediterranean and you have the average Mediterranean diet, you will do a lot better. Less mortality, heart disease, dementia, live longer, less diabetes, the whole raft of diseases. Now that brings us to a plant-based diet, because the Mediterranean diet is actually a very much plant-based diet because there's very little animal fat, bit of fish, and mainly vegetable-based. Now we come to the vegetarian diet, and the information that I have comes from a very big study that looked at 70,000 people in the USA called the Adventist Health Study. And what they found was that most vegetarians fared just as well as the Mediterraneans, except if you were an extreme vegetarian and were a vegan, you were then more likely to get deficient in B12, iron and zinc, because you get a lot of those in animal foods. So once again, the vegetarians had less heart disease, lived longer, less dementia, etc. So we're getting the message that a plant-based diet, mainly plants, is very, very good for you. And then we start to look at individuals. If someone's got a lot of allergy in their diet, like asthma, eczema, hay fever, then it's wise to avoid gluten, milk, yogurt and ice cream. If someone has autoimmune diseases like celiac, thyroid, rheumatoid arthritis, then it's wise to avoid gluten because gluten increases autoimmunity. But there are some autoimmune conditions where you need to avoid gluten and dairy, and one of them is multiple sclerosis. Another autoimmune condition, which is in its own group, involves avoiding all starch, which is slightly different. And that group has a positive HLA-B27 gene. Now, this HLA-B27 gene can be positive in a group of patients with psoriasis, psoriatic arthritis, some irritable bowel patients, ankylosing spondylitis, Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Now, not all of these people are positive with this gene, but if they are, it means that they need to avoid all starch, and it's called the London diet. So it's very interesting that we've come from Paleolithic times. We know that a mainly plant-based diet is good for us. We need to have a bit of meat or we'll get deficient, but at least if we have some eggs, that will help. And then once again, we know that primitive societies and underdeveloped countries don't get some of these Western diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and Crohn's disease. And the research suggests that we should be looking more specifically at certain foods for those people.